What's up, Bitcoin Radio? This is your host, Joe Blackburn. You're listening to the Bitcoin Hour. And today we have a really special guest with us, Miss Samantha Radocchia. And she's going to be talking a little bit about what she's done in the space and her accomplishments and her most recent book, Bitcoin Pizza. This is actually a really interesting and fun interview for me. I got a chance to talk to Samantha prior to the interview, and I felt like there was a lot of just synergy and a lot of collaborative opportunities, if that's even a word. But nevertheless, you're going to get a chance to hear that from her and the reasons why most of you listening today are going to know who I am and know me from Crypto Coin Trader and the messages that I have been speaking about for what now 2.5, 3 years publicly. So I think Samantha, and as she goes by Sam, I think she's going to come and bring a lot of that same sentiment, but with a very unique and different perspective. Sam has been really involved in this space now for some time. She's a co-founder of her company that we'll talk about. She's been a Forbes 30 under 30. More importantly, she's just been an absolute gem to the space as far as, her contributions on a social level, not to mention her keynote speaker positions, as well as she's an author and a journalist. She's written for Forbes. So I think what Sam brings to the table today is a very similar experience level as some of the higher names in the space. You may not have heard of her, maybe you have. But I can tell you this much, it won't take you long to remember who she is after this. So without further ado, come on, Sam, how's it going?
Hey, Joe. That was a great intro.
I appreciate it. I'm still getting used to doing these not live because, a lot of times with my live videos, Sam, like I know the person across from me. And although I've got a chance to get to know you, I don't know you super well. I wouldn't say that we've been lifelong friends or anything, but nevertheless, I'm really grateful that you came on. And I know that the audience listening today is going to really enjoy this podcast.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, thanks again for having me.
Sure, sure. So most recently, you just announced and released your book, Bitcoin Pizza, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you've done a lot of other things in the space. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself? Let everybody know who you are and what you've kind of done so far.
Yeah, so I'm kind of multifaceted. Maybe it's my ADD, maybe I just have many interests. So, as you mentioned, I've co-founded or founded a few companies in the space. I do a lot of writing and public speaking. I grew up as a gamer, which is probably when I started to get involved. So back in 2009, I actually was researching a virtual world called Second Life, which some of you maybe are familiar with.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I was just fascinated. I ran this digital t-shirt shop, was selling digital t-shirts and making Linden dollars, exchanging it for US dollars, and was really just like fascinated with these worlds. So I think that's like around the time I became aware of Bitcoin, and it's just been a journey since then.
Absolutely. And that sounds very similar to other people who've been in the space who've been in one way or the next. Maybe it was gaming. I know Brock Pierce was doing a lot of, was it World of Warcraft, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it sounds very similar to what you just described. But, you're a gamer. Wow. Like that's actually really awesome. I also enjoy gaming to an extent. It's something that I do, obviously more so for fun or as a hobby. But, how long would you say that you had been paying attention to Bitcoin prior to entering?
I guess the 1 year when I became aware of it, and then loosely became involved in terms of like various capacities, or just like hacking on projects with people, or
Sure.
or talking about it. So I remember even like while I was still in college, before I created my first company, which wasn't in the Bitcoin space, like I had a friend that was making, like a wallet way back then that like no one was going to use. So again, I mean, timing, I've always been interested and involved, whether it's been like academic or research or just dabbling with the technology. But it was in 2014, actually before that, maybe 2012 or 2013, when I was actually living in Park City, Utah, and I was fortunate enough. I was actually like trying to get out of tech after my first company and take some time in the mountains, work on ski patrol, and just do something
Oh, that's
different.
cool.
Enjoy the fresh air, work with explosives. I don't know, do crazy stuff. Um, Seriously, we carried like bombs in our backpacks. It was very, not
You're
bombs,
you're going
but
to have to explain that here
yeah,
shortly, though, by the way.
avalanche prevention. So you actually blow up the side of the mountain so that you trigger an avalanche. But anyways, so I was doing this. It was actually a really slow season. It didn't snow much, and I was a rookie, so I was doing some consulting, building projects as an engineer for people, and I came across some board members and folks from overstock.com who had been very early and supportive in Bitcoin,
Sure.
actually accepting it, and built a product then that was in the loyalty space, probably like an early precursor to a lolly. That obviously had no traction way back then. It was maybe more of just an experimental thing. And that's when I really was like, I see this. I want to make a company in this space. And teamed up with my co-founders for a company called Chronicled in 2014. And so, yeah, that's probably when I like actively started building, companies and teams.
Absolutely. And so, with that experience, with that knowledge, you've done quite a few different things, including being keynote speaker in many different places. We'll get into that too. But I want to focus first on your most recent book. This is really exciting for me. I personally have not got a chance to read it yet, but it has been referred to me by several different people, including Raina, as I know that's a mutual friend of ours. And that principle in which you wrote the book for, I think, just makes all the difference in what it says that you are as a person, or who you are as a person, is in you see this space as something that you want people to understand. You want to introduce it. You want it to be explained a way that you know how to relate to people. So I don't want to speak for your motivations or for your reasons for writing it, but that's just what I get in the principles that I've received from knowing you for the short time I have, plus knowing what my other friends have said about it. But let's hear it from you, Sam. Like, what is Bitcoin Pizza about, and what is the inspiration behind this book?
So to answer your first question, and you were spot on with my motivation, so I think you do know me well enough. The book is a high level, relatable, and ideally fun. It's in my voice guide. The subtitle is the No Bullshit Guide to Blockchain, and really I just wanted to give. I'd spent all of this time both running product in a crypto company, and then spent a lot of time building ecosystems and out with our customers. And I realized there was just this like huge gap in knowledge, and people would just jump right into like the technical details of
Yep.
everything. And as a technologist, I do appreciate that. It's a very important aspect of the space, but also the social elements and the cultural elements as well. So, there are people, say my parents or friends of mine, who live in, this parallel universe, and they work in normal not normal but like existing industries, and they're like, Sam,
Sure.
what do you do? Can you explain it? I totally don't understand it. And it's really for them, like, people who have heard about it from their companies or bosses or in the mainstream media, or their kids have bought Bitcoin and are talking about it at Thanksgiving or something like that. And really, the book goes into like the why it's important, and how both the technology but the underlying like social paradigm shifts are shaping the world today, and how they'll shape the world in the future. So it's definitely more on the goal is to bring people into the ecosystem. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to come and build a product or buy cryptocurrency, but feel welcome to participate in the conversation, or feel empowered to know more about it.
I on the book cover, you have obviously the name Bitcoin Pizza. I love it. It's kind of like neon lights, looks great. But then underneath it, the subtitle, or whatever you would call the statement underneath it, is the No Bullshit Guide to Blockchain. And as you just described, that's exactly what you're trying to do, is trying to cut out all the fat, try to make sure that it's digestible, and that, the people who are reading it and the audience that you have written this for can really relate to it. And I think what you do really well, better than most I've got a chance to speak to, Sam, is that you're able to relate on every level, whether you're a technologist or whether you're, Joe Schmo, right? And I think that goes into what you describe about yourself in a way, is that you say that you kind of combine the mindset of an anthropologist and a technologist, and that's, I've never even heard anybody describe themselves as that, by the way. So like to kind of shape who you are, I couldn't imagine anything more unique. That's perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's been hard to find where my strengths and weaknesses, like where do I fit? And I think we all struggle with that, or grapple with that in life, of like, what are my superpowers and how can I best use them? So I found that like I have this ability to digest and synthesize like complex technological like concepts, and then on the other hand, like I like people and understanding human behavior.
Sure.
So I sit somewhere in the middle of it, and this book was the perfect, like the best example of being able to use that to help our community, and to help people feel welcome to join it.
How long did it take you to write it?
think it's been overall maybe a 1.5 year to 2 year process, which is like a lifetime.
Oh, wow.
This
Yes.
space, it didn't, I wouldn't say I started like writing it 2 years ago. There was just this idea. It was, I had created this glossary of terminology that in like myths and things that were specific to the crypto and blockchain space. So terms like to the moon or Lambo or Lamborghinis, or like what are the significance of these things? Why are they
Why the
important?
hell are people saying this?
Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of a joke. And that was like the idea of the book. I just wanted to make like this fun illustrated glossary. But in talking to people, the feedback I got from that was that, these are great and you should definitely include, like, there is a glossary and it's a live glossary, and it, you can get to it from the book and it's throughout the book. But the feedback was that it might not be relatable enough to people who are new to the space. Like if you're just reading these terms and you're like the A to Z's of crypto. So, I expanded the concept into more of a narrative.
That makes complete sense. One of my favorite articles, because you're not just an author, you're a journalist, as I alluded to. You've written for Forbes, you've written for numerous respectable and really well known outlets. And the one that you wrote in April of 2019, I think this might have even been a Forbes article. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But the presenting blockchain without being boring. That kind of coincides, I think, a lot with what you meant with the book Bitcoin Pizza. And you brought up four main points in this. And as I read them, because I read the whole article, this is just the full four bullet points. And spoiler alert, unless you haven't read the article, you're about to find out what it says. But there's a lot of context in there too that I suggest that you read. But the 4 points are this: is number one, switch your styles. Number two, what excites you about this? 3, don't over rehearse. And 4, keep your ego out of it. As I read this, I finished the last bullet point and I said, you know what? That's not just in Bitcoin. That's in every presentation I ever do personally. I should take that advice. But it is especially true in the blockchain space because your audience is very different. What they care about is very different at times. And knowing your audience, whether it's 30 people or 3,000, which I know you've spoken in front of both, there's just so much simplicity in what you wrote in that. And so I guess like that mindset that you have, Sam, like it carries over in your writings that you're pretty consistent in all this.
I try to be.
No, it's really respectable, but we can kind of move past it a little bit. Let's kind of go back a little bit. You talk about your past, and stuff, and you said you got 2 brothers. You were a gamer. Let's kind of hear that transition that allowed you to start thinking a little bit more. I would almost call it freely, because blockchain and technology, although they go hand in hand, there's a lot of people in technology and that are technologists even care about Bitcoin, right? I mean, like they're just literally like, okay, Bitcoin, whatever, or Bitcoin's a scam, or Bitcoin will never last. What made it different for you?
I think that, again, this is like kind of the unique perspective that I've approached things from, is not just digging into the technology and understanding why the technology, or game theory or economics, like why that's important. It's been more of the high level social or sociocultural and geopolitical shifts that are occurring, and they started occurring because if you look at like the history of cryptography, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, I mean, there were numerous other attempts since the 70s before Bitcoin. This isn't necessarily new from the technological perspective, but for me, it was, what are all of these other factors that are leading up and converging at this moment in time? Before Satoshi's white paper in 2008, with the global financial crisis, with all of these things, and then the convergence of all of these other technologies in automation and the changing, future of work and future of production. Like, there are all of these things happening and accelerating at a rate, like a totally unprecedented rate. And the only times we've seen that before in history was like the agrarian revolution, when we like stopped being nomadic and started recording stuff on a ledger and farming, or the industrial revolution, or the mobile and networking or internet revolution. And so to me, technology aside, but if you really start to unpack the underlying values in this shift from centralized systems to open or decentralized systems, is a much bigger shift. And starting with again, the open source movement and open innovation movement. So like, to me, that's an inevitability. That's already well underway and happening. Absolutely. The world is a changing place. We are more connected than ever. We have these globalized networks, globalized supply chains. The borders on a map in nation states are no longer as relevant as they once were. And now we have these trust gaps. So like something needs to fill them. And I think this technology is like the perfect manifestation of that. So yeah,
Completely
that's
agree.
why I'm in this space. It's like once it clicks for you, um, and you really kind of understand how big this is, and like we're talking about the nature of money, which is the nature of everything and governance and the way that people have exchanged and organized, not just financially. I mean, that's a big concept, and it's really hard to walk away from it once you get involved.
It's the rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah.
I think back to some of my motivations, and most of mine was financial driven. When I first got into crypto and Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin, it was because I thought it might go up one day. I'm not ashamed of that, and I think most people who are honest with themselves, the majority of people in Bitcoin and crypto, I'm talking about just anybody who's bought it, who's been involved, whether you're who's building the greatest blockchain project on earth, the financial potential of gain was what motivated me, and I think that resonates with a lot of people. Now, I will say though, the ability for me to conceptualize that this is bigger than just I can make some money off of it came from, and this is kind of weird, but I don't care what anybody says. I'm a huge Star Trek: The Next Generation fan.
Mhm.
Jean-Luc Picard is probably the ultimate hero on fictional characters, at least. Patrick Stewart is my non-fictional hero, all right, and
Okay.
Jean-Luc Picard is my fiction. But regardless, Star Trek: The Next Generation is probably one of the most incredible experiences I had as a young grown up or adult, should I say, growing up through college when I first started watching it at late at night when it was on like BBC or whatever it was. And I started seeing that, the way that people interact in the future, it allowed me to think that, hey, 300, 400, 1,000 years from now, things are going to be so much different. And think about literally how small-minded we can be. Even the most, progressive and even at times liberal person can have issues with conceptualizing that this is going to all change, that we're all going to be in a different spot, that hopefully humanity is able to band together at some point. I expect them to. Money maybe will never be relevant again one day in 1,000 years. Who knows? Maybe everything's just been so perfected and we have robots and we have AI that just runs our lives for us and we're living in some AI world, but it's an enjoyable one, hopefully, or the opposite happens and Terminator shows up and tries to kill everybody. But nevertheless, that was kind of like what allowed me to even conceptualize this. And I find that like most people that were in early enough had some sort of realization moment where it was like this event or this sequence of events is what allowed me to conceptualize this on a higher level.
I come from sort of a similar area. I mean, I'm like a huge science fiction, particularly utopian and dystopian,
Oh my gosh, keep going.
literature nut. So
Keep talking.
besides anthropology, my other major was in, my focus was in utopian, dystopian literature and science fiction, like television and media. So, I mean, if we're talking like The Matrix or Equilibrium or Gattaca or all of like these movies, those were like, or something like The Diamond Age or like these novels, I just like grew up totally fascinated with the fact that there were, from like the futurist perspective, like this was an inevitability, but
Yep.
there's always a crossroads, right? And utopias were they're kind of boring because it's so easy, everything's perfect, nothing really happens. So of course we've seen more dystopias, and like we can see a lot of this also playing out over the years or even in our present life with surveillance capitalism and wielding these tools in the wrong way. So for me, I feel this like very strong responsibility, in that if we're building the future and we have the power to build this, we're building the present as well, and we have these amazing technologies, then we should use it for the better. And I think at any inflection point in human history, there are a lot of, that's where we can make these decisions. And so that was like another motivation for both getting involved in the space, two, staying involved in the space beyond just speculation and money, and three, writing the book and bringing more people into the space because,
Absolutely.
we need to work together. um, hopefully not to like automate all of our jobs and hopefully not destroy our planet and just, build spaceships that we can go live on and leave everyone else down here to suffer. So regardless of what's going on, I think that's why I'm so fascinated with uh, these technologies in particular.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so let me ask you, this is a little kind of off topic, but in 1,000 years, what's more likely, a utopia or a dystopia on a mass scale?
I mean, I think it depends where you are. If we're a bunch of, even if it's people on spaceships or uploaded consciousness into robots that live on spaceships that are, living in some matrix like simulation as we blast through the universe, and are mining asteroids. I don't know whether that's utopian or dystopian. Maybe everything, the system is perfect, and we're sending Bitcoin across laser beams through space. Like, that's cool. I think
that would be really cool, by the way.
I do value the human race and physicality in our planet and nature. And my hope is that for the people who are still here on this planet, because I do spend a lot of time with like these extreme futurists that are, 3D printing spaceships in space as we speak, like really intense stuff that's happening right now.
Yep.
And, the argument there is like, okay, well, we're already thinking of our exit strategy, and forgetting about everything that's happening down here on the planet. I hope that with these technologies, we can create more sustainable, and not just in terms of environmental sustainability, but financial sustainability, more sustainable and equitable businesses or systems or inclusive systems for people, so that we do move more towards not fully utopian, but certainly closer to that vision where we're living in some sort of empowered harmony.
Well,
but I'm also not naive as a person, so it's not. I'm
Sure.
pretty realistic about the chances of that happening, and I don't know, but it's fascinating to see how many people who really do believe that we can make a significantly positive change, and that encourages me to stay in the space.
Well, okay, so I agree and disagree in some respects, but this is what I'll say. The moment that the replicator from Star Trek actually exists, it changes the world's view on everything, right? And that will happen. I have hopes. And I don't necessarily live realistically in my own mind, right? I do try to present myself as realistic. But now that we're talking about Star Trek, this is my favorite topic on Earth. I won't talk about it anymore, I promise, Sam. But once we can get the replicator up and going, that's just. You can have a.
What is the replicator in Star Trek?
The replicator allows you to replicate everything from a hot bowl of soup to a shirt or whatever you want to replicate. It's just literally like, this is what it is. It takes all the molecules, it collects them from space, and puts them into the replicator, and boom, you got a hot cup of Earl Grey tea, as John Luke Picard's favorite drink would be.
People?
No, but they do have the transporters, which then disintegrates you essentially, and then puts you back together at the next transporter stop.
I see.
Yes. I highly encourage you to watch it. It's a little bit outdated as far as graphics, but the lessons are eternally lasting.
Definitely. Thank you for the recommendation.
You got it. All right. Anyways, we can move on from Star Trek, but agreed on the overall concept. I think we share a lot of the same interest level on that. Whether it be a TV show like Jericho, which I grew up watching that, all the way to whatever's out next year. There's a lot of things coming out. All right. So moving on, let me ask you this question, Sam. Is what do you think the defining moment in cryptocurrency has already happened? Or do you think that, or blockchain, crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, or do you think that's yet to come? I mean, do you think it's something like Libra? And I know that you've done some work in Libra, and that's kind of why I brought it up. But would you say, even if that's the defining moment, the creation of Libra?
That's a tough one. I have very, very mixed opinions on Libra. I initially was like, this is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. We have this like permission network with these large companies that are maybe not to be trusted on the privacy side, as node operators who have like privileged access. It kind of goes against some of the underlying principles. On the flip side, a lot of people, have the feedback said this is great for the space. It's bringing more awareness. Certainly on the US side, it's pushing the regulators to actually talk about stuff. Which we all need to move more quickly on that from the US's perspective, or at least provide some guidance so we can continue to innovate.
Absolutely.
But I've spoken to people. I'm giving this talk in Brazil, and I was introduced to people who are working with Venezuelan refugees that are living on the border on the Brazilian side, and they overwhelmingly are in support of and excited for Libra. And so, for them, their feedback was like, well, Facebook and MasterCard and some of these other players we trust them more than we trust our government. So it's, a winning situation compared to what is. And so it changed my perspective a little bit. And I still feel the way I originally felt about it. I hope that it's Bitcoin that wins out in the long run. And I believe that it will. But in terms of something that Facebook is really good at doing is creating a seamless and almost invisible user experience, which is still quite clunky in respect to some of the other tooling. But again, it's getting better every day. Yesterday, I sent an invoice, using a product, Gilded actually, to sell some copies of my book for Bitcoin. It was totally seamless, integrated with my QuickBooks. It's amazing. Yes. And that's been over the past year or two where we've really started to up the ante. So to answer your question, has the moment passed? No, I think we're in it right now. I think the next couple of years are going to be wild. We're seeing institutional players get involved. We're seeing the media, and not just in this way where the media was villainizing crypto or saying there are a bunch of ICO scams or that it's a volatile asset. We're actually seeing first on the global scale, examples of market manipulation or currency manipulation. We're seeing currencies collapse, and not in this scary way, doomsday scenarios, but sure. These are actually the areas where there's a ton of it's ripe for adoption and innovation and kind of building this infrastructure from the ground up. So I think that moment is here. It's happening. It's really exciting.
Okay, so I'm listening to you, Sam. You're really well put together when you talk about this stuff. It's clearly something that you've thought a lot about and you think at a high level. Again, you explain it very realistically, though. And I think this is maybe the anthropologist in you that's so, that you have, as we alluded to earlier, that you have such a desire to find out some of these inner workings and how and why and what's going to happen next, based off of your findings. But talk a little bit about that anthropologist in you. Who is that person, Sam? Where does that coexist with the space that you're in right now?
For as long as I could remember, I've been a curious person. I think when I realized I was curious about other people and their behavior, I tried to figure out what that was. And so I originally started studying neuroscience on that level. And I have this background in theater and film. So I actually used to do some acting and
what have you not done? Can we just set that aside, right?
I wasn't as prolific of a childhood actor as Brock Pierce, but I did some of it as a kid. And
Brock Pierce played young Emilio Estevez. It's hard to beat that anyways,
right?
It's
hard to. He was incredible. Yeah. But I think that just I became really in touch with observing people, and when I started directing people and just being so fascinated, I'd sit on the subway and do these exercises where I'd watch people and try to write their stories and create these whole elaborate things. And so anthropology just felt natural. The form of study or ethnography is really just, observing people. So honestly, I never thought that it would be relevant in my life. I did try to make it work in terms of studying how technology impacts people is really what was interesting me. And again, this background in utopias and dystopias, I don't want to seem like a pessimistic person, but the way I see the world or have is always been more from this speculative or tentative, very tentative about technology. Here I am as a founder of these companies, I build this technology, but is it going to mess people up? Is it already messing people up? So that was the perspective where I really, wanted to understand how these systems were impacting people on a large scale. And so in the crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin space, I think it's incredibly important, the social sciences, and now more people are talking about it and becoming aware of it. Early on, and I'd say it's 50-50 split between the need for technical engineering and technologists, and then social engineering and social scientists, because we're talking about the capability, the technology. A lot of it's already there, and we'll make excuses and say it's about scalability or infrastructure or user experience, and it's no, it's also about the fact that we're talking about changing entire monetary systems or governance systems, like that's a social effort as well. And so
and one that a lot of people have a vested interest in not happening too.
oh, totally. I mean, that's like the biggest roadblock to adoption, I'd argue, because the technical challenges, and as a technologist and building products, both as an engineer and running product or running a company, like I know, we all know that like there's always a way. We can always engineer a way around or into, or to create a solution, or the good engineers can. We'll figure it out. But when it comes to social engineering, I mean, these things, it's so complex to balance and align incentives, particularly when the current system works so well for so many people, both good and bad.
Absolutely. There's, to me, like while we're in the infancy of blockchain, Bitcoin, crypto, we're at such a precipice of, how are we perceived? Is good going to come out of this? We've had a lot of negative attention, and a lot of people's, they have this flavor in their mouth of, get rich quick scheme or pyramid scheme, with things like BitConnect getting a lot of attention, and also all the SEC things that are coming down, especially the last week. So these things are in the news now, and they have been now for what, 3, 4, 5 years, where it's become a lot more prevalent. But after 2017, which 2017 was a very different year because it was the first year that a lot of different altcoins were introduced, a lot of different projects were introduced. Before that, we were limited. There was only a few different projects that, especially the ones that you could actually go buy or that were easily exchangeable. But now, looking forward, we're seeing the implementation of businesses that are operating, or businesses that have already existed implementing this blockchain technology into things that make our lives better. And this is cliche, and I know a lot of people agree with me already, but I stand by it. The day that blockchain is actually recognized as a credible and realistic idea for most people is the day they have no clue that they're using it.
Yep.
And at that point, again, like, I'm not saying that I came up with that concept, but that's something I absolutely believe, is that, I don't care how my PayPal works. I don't care how Visa or MasterCard works. I just use it. And if I have to think about it, it's more of a inconvenience. This is just regular Joe talking. I mean, not a woke Joe or awakened Joe, however that word should sound.
Woke.
But yeah, woke. Thank you. I should keep you around just to make sure I said the right words, by the way. Not that I would actually expect you to ever want to do that.
Joe is grammatically correct, but I think it's
it works. Woke Joe. Hashtag.
Culturally correct. Hashtag woke Joe.
I'll take it. No, and I appreciate that, at least, even if you're making fun of me, I at least appreciate you, what's the word, supporting me and not making me feel stupid.
Always.
All right. So, but saying all those things, I have 4 main pinch points that I think are going to change the way that blockchain is perceived. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. I think we agree on most of them, but I want you to interject and tell me if you think I'm wrong or if I'm missing something too, right? And I know I get the first, it's my show, Sam, so I get to sound smart first, but you can kill me afterwards. But
right.
Supply chain is number 1, and that also goes in. I would include the medical field in their supply chain. Voting / government accountability. We kind of just touched on that a little bit. Gaming, which I know that you have a soft spot for gaming, and the most obvious one, and the one that we're most familiar with, is the currency aspect. And these 4, to me, are what is going to propel, or they're going to get stifled, and it's going to take us even longer. If these 4 things aren't what's being used first, I don't see another avenue for us to take hold. Now, clearly, these are very easy, I think, for blockchain to get involved in, because they offer in my opinion, of course, feel free to disagree with me. I would love to get in an argument. You'd be my first argument on my podcast, by the way, if that were to happen. But nevertheless, that's just my overall thoughts. What do you think?
I mean, I completely agree.
Duh. I mean, it's me.
Most part, duh, so smart. Yeah,
I'm so smart.
Naturally, I was having a conversation the other day, and we say this so nonchalantly, like, reinventing money. I mean, that alone, if that's the thing that happens, and I know a lot of people on, kind of the maximalist side say, like, that's it. It's just the Bitcoin blockchain. Everything else is, totally not the use case for it. Fine. If that's really what it is, reinventing, the concept.
I can argue that point all day and make it so easy. I can't even, I believe I'm a maximalist when it comes to currency, but everything else, Bitcoin can stay the hell out, in my opinion.
Yeah. So again, if that's number 1, and that was the first one, and that's what stays, like, great. That's a massive project that's unlocking, incredible value, bringing and involving and including tons of people who are currently left out of traditional systems or banking systems. So I think that's amazing. My experience in the company I co-founded in 2014 is in this. So, we started with this mission of exploring non-financial use cases for, the Bitcoin blockchain way back then. And, it evolved into Ethereum and then permissioned networks. And then, there's all of these things that happen in the meantime. And it's moved into, securing the pharmaceutical supply chain. So, drugs and also both the flow of goods and the flow of money through the supply chain. So it's kind of on both sides. And I think a lot, I'd say that's the number 2 use case, or at least like when I was working in the space, it was my mission to make it known that that was the number 2 use case. And again, totally, I think voting goes hand in hand with actually currency. So when I think when you start to unpack like the nature of money, why money exists, how it exists, and that, why there are central authorities or banks or governments that are controlling that, then you immediately get into governance. So a project that I'm like pretty passionate about is Decred, because of the combination both of the currency and the governance in that, and I've been, supporting or following closely. So I mean, we did talk about this a little bit yesterday, that we're not going to see the United States, even though we can today make a blockchain-based, voting system. We're seeing Palladium used for the Decred's like decision-making process, like that community. It's not the engineering challenges of why it's not being implemented. It's the social challenges. Like our current system works to the advantage of way too many people. So the United States, like, hell no, that's not happening right now. I hope it does. That would be great. But we'll probably, as we discussed, see it in smaller countries, or countries that don't have, as deeply of entrenched or perhaps even a corrupt system where, they're ready for that kind of change. And of course, gaming, I agree with that. I mean, that's how I got into this space. I think this is where it's natural, from, the NFT side, or, digital assets, that, gamers understood this concept long before it became mainstream to understand it.
Agreed completely. Just thinking about this, like, I've been on record before on one of my videos, or several of my videos, but I really, I'm just reinforced in my thought process every time this conversation comes up. And it's obviously, it's a pleasure and it's an honor to kind of hear your thoughts on it, because you do bring a very broad and very, I would even say as broad as it can be, because you can blanket a lot of different areas that you're also very specific in what you're talking about. And it's really interesting to hear that perspective. But like I said, it reinforces this thought, is that that this is humanity's last chance to kind of take back, not just like our money, but our individual freedoms. The more that our freedoms are online and are governed by how the internet works, that's going to continue. We're only going to get deeper infused and more reliant on the internet, and so thus we're going to become, way more involved just as humans do. And it's hard to think about my life being even more so on the internet at some point, because a lot of my life already is on the internet. But flash forward 25 years from now, it's going to probably double the amount, if that's even possible. I can't even imagine. But this might be humanity's last chance to have this opportunity. I'm not saying that it has to happen next year, but the beginning of what Bitcoin has brought, blockchain. This is, again, my personal thoughts. I don't want to put this on you, Sam, and I appreciate you putting up with me talking about it. But I want to see blockchain be able to take back our rights, to take back our data, our privacy, but also our control of money, of our individual responsibility of money. You said something earlier, and I agree with you for the most part, but about how we're changing the way money works, or kind of what we're doing is we're going back to the way that it originally worked with gold. And there's a lot of ways to kind of correlate how gold, you had to go mine it, you had to go put in the work, you had to find it, then you had to shape it, you had to make it something, or you could just hand it over as a rock. But whatever it might be, this precious metal that we always saw as valuable in essentially every single civilization, especially the higher civilizations, whether you're in South America, whether you're in, Europe, whether you were in China, gold was valued. And that's how I see Bitcoin just kind of going back to its basics, of what humans believe currency should be.
Yeah, I mean, a book that I totally recommend and love, and I'm not sure if you've read it, but if you haven't, you should. It's called Debt: The First 5,000 Years by David.
Is that one of the Star Trek books?
No,
I'm
it's
just joking.
he's actually, it's cool. I didn't know this. He's an anthropologist.
Wow.
But
Okay.
cut more,
Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead and like state the title again real quick. And I'll.
debt the first 5,000 years. And it's kind of the history, not necessarily of money, but of debt, or these mechanisms of credits and debits. And, first of all, yeah, there's a lot about gold in there, but also these local currencies. So whether it was, in southern Italy, wheels of cheese or Parmesan cheese were kind of the local store of value, or cultures that use dried, fish in the Nordic areas. And so, we had gold as kind of this universal store of value, but then there were also, I guess, their equivalent of altcoins, or like currencies that then traded into gold, if we want to use that analogy. And really the point was that someone would keep these things, these objects, these valuable items somewhere, but really people, they didn't ever barter. They weren't like moving the stuff around. It was just basically a ledger of credits and debits, and it was all based on this kind of face-to-face trust. And so yes, we're moving full circle back to a system where on a global scale, so now in a globalized context, not just in our local village, we can do this. And I think that's just so powerful, so incredible. And to circle back to your original point that this is the last chance for humanity, I mean, that's again before I even got into this space, and was still like, I continued my research and was fascinated with internet privacy and governance, and read a lot of the works of kind of the early pioneers that were advocating for an open internet. And that didn't happen. We failed. We, of course, we built this like, globally connected network. It's unlocked a lot of value, opportunities, connection, but at the same time, it's kind of gone a little haywire. So we have, again, these opportunities right now at this moment in time to do it better. And that just one, it puts some urgency on it, of like we've got to do this, or else we're going to end up in some like creepy dystopian surveillance capitalist state where every move, every transaction is tracked and controlled, and we have social credit scores and reputation scores, and the autonomous vehicle makes the decision to hit me over hitting you because I bought a wine last night and you didn't. Like things like that. Like we could quickly go into, these kind of dark realms. And so I'm happy that we're not. I'm happy that we have alternative systems, and better systems. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on that point.
Well, we're fighting this battle together, and there's a lot of us that stand by each other. And there's a really great opportunity. And I say this, and I brought this up to you yesterday too, is that we're really privileged. We kind of hit on this a little bit, to live as an American. This is the wealthiest nation to ever exist. It's an empire at this point, and you can say good and bad about both sides of it. But as an American, you're blinded in so many different ways. Not you specifically, but we all are blinded to the fact that there's a real world out there besides the United States of America that suffers, or that has a really hard time. Zimbabwe, or they had a $3 trillion bill. Everybody, that's that famous bill that we see passing around social media when it comes to why Bitcoin should exist. It's the example we hear about. Like Venezuela, as you brought up your experience with them and talking to these people. There's so much potential to help these people to bring a better world. It's the same concept as what I tell my community. An educated community brings better results to the crypto community. So if I got 116,000 people in this group, 75,000, 80,000 active users per month, if we could just increase the cognitive, or let me actually back up. If we could just increase the basic knowledge of every individual on there, and there's a lot of really high level thinking people in that group. I am so fortunate to have a relationship and a network that has helped guide me and build me up and support me and listen to me and want more from me. But there's a lot of people in there that don't have a lot of a foundation, and they have trouble explaining or even understanding. They're only in it for the money. What I want when it comes, like when I hang up my cleats from the Bitcoin days, which I hope is never, until the day I die, but whenever that day might come, I hope that I have left this place better. And Sam, I know that for a fact you have already done such, and what you're doing next, who knows, right?
Thank you. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. I feel so deeply connected to the mission and the community and all of the people that I've met. It's, it's one of the best. I'm so happy that I found myself into this community. Like, that's all I can say. And I really do feel good to do what I can do best, to share knowledge and empower people with knowledge. Because that's the basis of everything. If people feel equipped, they then feel confident. Like,
So
if you get one thing out of this book, I don't even care. You could say this book sucks, or I didn't like her voice, or like that I disagree with that chapter. Great. But if you feel confident to walk into a room with like a bunch of colleagues at work and then, like, share something from it, or say, yeah, I know what proof of work is. Or if you then go buy another book or start Googling and read some Medium posts about it, like, great, I've done my job. And so to build that confidence and then share the message, or even not, but just like feel more confident, that's what I hope to do.
This is a little bit off topic, but you kind of brought something up, and I wanted to ask you this. Do you find, like, when you're explaining to people, that it's best to use analogies that are relatable, or do you try to stay away from analogies? This is just a personal question.
So I tend to think on a certain level of abstraction where I appreciate analogies. So even in one of my talks, like, I've tried to find analogies, and like plenty of people will do, like, describe how a blockchain works by comparing it to another piece of software, like a Google document or
Sure.
something. I think a little more abstractly, like that's a literal example. One that I use is kind of the significance of thinking about a map. So like MapQuest it was solving a problem. It was like making a map digital and giving you directions from point A to point B. But Google Maps, they saw it differently as an open system by which companies could build on top of that, use that API and build on the data. So we saw Uber and we saw Airbnb and we saw, all of the food delivery apps. So we saw this whole demand economy basically be created. That's 10 years of value, a totally new business model, because location data became publicly available. That's just one.
That's a great analogy, by the way.
Yeah, so no, does it describe how a blockchain works? No, but it's an analogy to like describe the kinds of things we can expect. I can't tell you what the business models will be or how the world will change. I can like speculate, but I'm not a fortune teller. But like, what I can say is that it will be like that, but so much bigger. And so, because that's just location data. Imagine that, but with all data or with all currency. Like, that's pretty powerful. So
Nailed it.
I like to use analogies when they can be effective to, elicit an emotional response from people, or like that aha moment. But not too often. I think, sometimes you can get lost in the clouds and be like, yeah, cool, but I still don't really understand what it is. So, I think a good balance.
No, that was incredible, Sam. And so, look, we've been running a little bit over, so I won't keep you any longer. I do want to finish with some questions. I do some quick fires at the end of my podcast. I kind of warned you ahead of time that they were coming. Just be prepared. Obviously, it won't be anything that's going to make you look bad or that would be offensive. I hope not. Feel free to not answer anything you don't want to, but I would be mad at you if you didn't. How about that? Fair? Mm-hmm. All right. So we'll start with this. Have you ever been, okay, hold on, everybody. Just for the listeners back home, we're about to wind this down. Do my quick fire. I want to give a big shout out right now to you, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll say this again before we actually get off, but your insight, the way that you communicate your insight and the way that you explain your insight is one of a kind. I've never met anybody like you on this, at least in my experiences. I'm not saying there aren't more like you, but there's very few of them. And I'm very proud and I was very honored that you wanted to come on my show today.
The pleasure is all mine, Joe. Cool. This has been a great conversation.
All right. So let's get into this awesome quick fires. And again, feel free not to answer, but I'll be mad at you if you don't. But nevertheless, here we go. Have you ever been into a really heated argument or fight on stage while in front of a big audience?
With an audience member or with someone on stage? Yes. Every time I speak, there is always that one person in the audience who tries so hard to contradict or stump me. So I do need to defend myself in those situations.
Yeah. I heard that. All right. Well, I don't want to get too deep, but like, what was what is typically the way that you try to resolve that?
I thank them for their comment and provide
I love feedback.
I gently correct them if they are mistaken.
Gently. Have you ever not gently corrected them back?
No, I think I mean if you're on stage and you're being,
Too much noise.
compensated to be there and
Yep.
have to maintain a level of professional. I mean, I live this way in my life. I prefer if someone's getting heated, it's the best, counter move just to stay chilled out and let them do all the work of getting heated up. Like, you know, fighting back and expending energy on that is actually not the best way to fight. So,
Well, that's well said. I can't disagree
like
with
a
you, but I
peaceful
will
warrior.
always agree with you. I come from a different background. Don't hate. All right.
Oh, that's
Next
fine.
question. I know. No, I appreciate your answer. And you're right, by the way. Next question is, and I'm going to change this because I kind of forewarned you on what this next question was going to be, but I'm actually going to switch it up. Okay. Have aliens ever visited the Earth?
Yeah, I don't know, probably in the
What
billions
would you
of
say the
years.
percentage of chance? What's the percent chance that that happened?
That's tough. I can't put a number on that.
You could. You're just not going
I
to.
just, I, okay, I'll just be in the middle, 50%.
That's actually higher than I expected, so I'll take it. But I won't hold you to that either. All right, moving on. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Well, I listed some now. I'd say The Matrix, and that's pretty cliche. I know. I do enjoy another movie around that time, Gattaca,
Gattaca's
and
great. Yep.
Equilibrium. Also,
What?
like,
What's
I don't
Ethan
know.
Hawke, right? Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, it was
That's a
good.
great movie.
Devil Wears Prada. I just love Meryl Streep in that movie, and it's
That's
so
awesome.
cheesy. But being in supply chain, and I did like apparel supply chain in my first company, and that whole monologue she has about the cerulean blue sweater and how like significant it is and where it came from. I found myself in many meetings over the years about like talking about tracking thread and t-shirts. So, gotta say that one too.
There are no wrong answers, and I completely agree why that would make sense.
Yeah.
All right, so next one is Bitcoin as a political party. Yes or no?
Yes.
Decentralization?
As a party?
Well, included.
Yes.
Interesting. Because, I agree, but I think humans love to be governed and they want to blame somebody when things go bad.
Oh, you're
So,
okay. Like a fully decentralized.
no, that's not what I'm
Okay.
saying. It's very vague.
Yeah.
I was just making a really cool comment.
No, I do think people like to have places or institutions to point the finger or look to when things go wrong. So I don't think it'll be fully. I think machines could be fully, govern decentralized.
No,
Uh,
agreed. They better be.
yeah, totally.
If they're not, we're in some trouble.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Last question, and this is it. And then we'll let you go, Sam. Again, we're really grateful for the fun. And this is like the personal side, like let everybody know that you're a real person too, right? But you said that
Unless
you're a
I'm an
gamer.
alien or a robot. I did say 50%.
I have yet to meet you in person. Not that I'm like, look, if you're an alien or a robot and you've made it this long, I'm sure I'm not gonna be the one to figure it out. But long story short, that is always a possibility. If you were an AI, even cooler. I cheers you. I mean, I'm just glad I got to interview you. Please be an AI. That would be actually really
That
awesome for
would
my
be
record.
so fun
Yeah.
on my journey of self-discovery if I find that out. But
If you ever decide, if you actually are either of those things and you want, please come on my show so we can tell everybody. That would be like,
okay.
that's my request. All right. And last question is this: since you're a gamer, what's the best game of all time?
Oh, hands down, Age of Empires.
Oh, going
That
back.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what's up. All right. Okay. Look, I agree with you. I mean, but wouldn't you say like once those cheat codes came out? I mean, like they ruined it. We're talking about
I
Age of
know,
Empires
like
one. I hope.
Photon Man. Like
Photon Man.
rolling up. I would always like roll up with my lasers and
Whoa.
destroy. Well, it kind of made it not fun. It was just the game was over. You'd like, you know, kill
You
each
just
other.
killed
And
it.
that was
But
it.
you win. I was gonna come back with something a second ago, but you just nailed. You just said Photon Man. I will end it on that. Hey, thanks so much again, Sam. That was perfect answer. Age of Empires, everybody. If you haven't played it, you might want to. The graphics might be bad, but it's worth it. All right, Sam. Thank you again for coming on. Let's go ahead and where can everybody find you at? Let's hear that real quick.
So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and all the social networks at Sam Rad Official. Or Google me. I have a website and a blog.
What's your website called?
It's samantharadocchia.com or
Hmm.
samradofficial.com.
How original. Actually, it's original. That's what's up.
Yeah.
So it's just your name. Obviously, you have Bitcoin Pizza, as we've talked about several times. Where can we buy that book at?
So it's available on Amazon. just under Bitcoin Pizza. Search for that. If you don't prefer Amazon and you want to earn some Bitcoin back with Lolly, I noticed it's on Barnes and Noble. That's pretty cool. Or if you want to pay in crypto, you can just contact me or buy it through my website, and we can arrange that.
Well, that's amazing. Well, so you have Twitter, you have your website, you have Bitcoin Pizza, the book. Everybody, if you have any questions, you can also ask me and I'll direct you as well. Sam, thanks again. It means the world. It was a wonderful conversation. You know, we went from Age of Empires to you're potentially an AI all the way back to, you know, the dawn of humanity, like however it started. It was a great conversation, and I'm glad that me and you got to have it.
Likewise. Thank you so much again for having me.
Until next time, Bitcoin Radio, you know where the cryptoverse belongs. It belongs to all of us, right? Bitcoin Radio, where Bitcoin lives, is right here. Until next time, see you soon.